Head coach Kellen Moore is proving that he was absolutely the right hire for the New Orleans Saints. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're going to tell you why the trenches, the offensive line and defensive line, are still the biggest unknown around the New Orleans Saints right now. We'll dive into 8 stars from offseason programs, OTAs, and minicamp as we begin our look back at the offseason program so far. But I want to start today with head coach Kellen Moore, who has proven me wrong and who has proven to many that he is absolutely the right head coach for the New Orleans Saints at this time. We got that coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much, as always, whether it's your first time or your next time, being here with us this time, making us your first listen, and being it every day or here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Kellen Moore is proving that he is absolutely the head coach that the New Orleans Saints need right now, and he's doing it quickly, and he's doing it in a variety of different ways. I want to start off with what he's doing on the field, because that's what's going to translate to wins and losses most immediately. I like what the New Orleans Saints have done so far this offseason. I have some questions about whether or not they could have done more in terms of improving their roster, but you've heard that for months and months at this point. I think the biggest thing for me is that the Saints flipped their coaching staff entirely, but then really relied on kind of smart investments in free agency, but also mostly on young talent, the NFL draft where they got their quarterback, undrafted free agency, all that, to really bring in the new faces on their roster. No big splash signings, stuff like that. They did bring in some good talent, signing Justin Reed, bringing Will Clapp back to New Orleans, going out there and re-signing and extending Chase Young to keep him around for around another 3 years. I think they've made good moves to begin to kind of lay the building blocks and the foundation for what that roster will eventually turn into, which I expect a big time turnover going into 2025 in terms of old faces on their way out, new faces on their way in, all those other things. Or I shouldn't say old faces, I should say familiar faces on their way out, new faces on their way in. So maybe you'll see a little bit more changeover on the roster next season. But the other things that I like that they've done is that they've effectively said, look, the Saints like what they have on the roster. They just didn't believe that the coaching staff that they had prior to this one took advantage of the talent that was on the roster. Plus, there were injuries and things like that. So they must believe in this roster. And now they bring in a coach who brings in a slew of other coaches that ends up helping to move this team forward. A lot of innovative, forward thinkers, a lot of common sense thinkers. Oh, a player doesn't do this well. Well, let's not ask him to do that and let's teach him how to do that. But instead, let's ask him to do the thing that he does know how to do well. Speaking with wide receiver coach Keith Williams, who was with the previous regime and one of the few holdovers coming into this new coaching staff. He talked about how he had offers elsewhere, but wanted to stay here in New Orleans, loves the wide receiver room, and mentioned that one of the things that they really like, that he really likes about the way that Kellen Moore is kind of running things over on the offensive side, is that if they believe that a player can do something and he's not doing it, then they'll teach him how to do it and then have him do it. It sounds so rudimentary. It sounds so obvious. It sounds so basic, but it wasn't always that way, and it's not always that way in the NFL. Sometimes coaches have systems and roles that they go out there and they get players to, and they try to take that square peg and stick it in a round hole and hope that they can make it all work out. And so they can't change the mold. So they're not changing the mold of the role. And instead, they're trying to change the mold of the player. Whereas Kellen Moore, Brandon Staley, I'd go so far as to say highlight Phil Galliano in this as well. Those guys and this coaching staff across all positions are very much focused on changing the mold of the role to fit the shape of the player and the skill set of the player. So little things like that. So I think that from a on-field perspective, you can kind of see the vision of where this team wants to go, the innovative way that this team wants to move forward. The other thing that I like that he's doing on the field is that he's working and focusing on keeping his players healthy. No 11 on 11s. The reason why he hasn't done any 11 on 11s is because he's trying to get his guys to training camp. He's trying to get his guys on the field at the beginning of the season. So it's been all 9 on 7s. It's been all 7 on 7s. Anytime that they do kind of full team walkthroughs, they do it without helmets. Why? Because helmets encourage contact. He wants to keep the physicality down. He wants to reduce the contact so that these guys aren't taking on these little micro bumps and bruises and things like that end up weakening them by the time or impacting them by the time they go through this break, which isn't a break for the players. They're going to be training like crazy to get ready for training camp. And then they get into training camp and they've suffered all these little nicks and bruises and bumps and all this other stuff. And they're that much weaker or that much more, let's say, ailed by the time they get to training camp, that you end up with all these little more major injuries that take place during training camp that we've seen impact the Saints over the course of the past few years. So I like what they're doing from the coaching staff standpoint. I'm okay with what they're doing from the roster standpoint, knowing that it's a multi-year process on the roster. I like what they're doing in terms of how they're handling the OTA and minicamp practices. And I also like the fact that the Saints canceled the final practice of minicamp on Thursday. And I've seen a lot of people say, oh, well, this is a poverty franchise now. They're not taking things seriously. Let me tell you something. If the difference between the Saints having a winning season and the losing season in the regular season is one minicamp practice, a lot of other things have gone wrong. No one's going to be looking at the results of the 2025 season and going, man, well, if they would have just practiced that one day during minicamp in that non-contact, non-full speed, non-team drill environment, they would have been Super Bowl champions. No one's looking back at the end of the season and going to even remember that this team canceled their final minicamp practice, except for, of course, you and I. So why I like it, team building, camaraderie, relationships, all those other things, that has been a major focus for Kellen Moore and this team so far this offseason. From paintball as a team to helping to rebuild the Trinity Community Center in Holly Grove, to strengthening the connection between the players, the coaches, and the community. Trinity Community Center, as an example of that, opening minicamp to fans, canceling a minicamp practice, but not the one that fans were invited to. And then they cancel the minicamp practice. Why? So they can go into a team building, team outing at 504 Golf. Awesome. Great way to spend a day. So how do they do it? They held a 3-point contest in the team meeting room. They have like a little mini hoop over in the team meeting room, same meeting room that we were in during like the draft and all that kind of stuff. We've seen it. And Juwan Johnson was the captain of the offense. I suppose that the offense won the offense versus defense 3-point contest that they held. And then Juwan Johnson was told, pick a player. If that player sinks the 3-pointer, you all get a day off of practice. He picked Hunter Deckers, who has a high school basketball background. Hunter Deckers sinks the 3-pointer. Bang, they're going to 504 Golf for the day. Hurrah, very fun. Like, even down to the way that they learned that they were going to get the day off, it was fun. It was engaging. It was competitive. There was team building. There was relationship building. There was trust. There was celebration. All of this other stuff. There was a player coming through for the rest of the roster. It's team building. Look at the fact that the Saints are going to go to Irvine again at the end of training camp as they go into the preseason. The Saints will open the training camp at the Metairie facility here in New Orleans. Kellen Moore being very clear about that over and over again. We're staying at home. We're going to be at home. We're going to be at home, but also going to go away. This wins on both sides and both angles for Kellen Moore. He's a part of bringing training camp back home. I'm sure some of those practices will be open to the community. I'm guessing we'll find out, but I don't see why they wouldn't be, considering minicamp had open days. And then what does he do? Takes players from August 6th to August 15th to California, where they're in the same hotel, where they're having dinner together, where they're hanging out with one another, where they're going and doing things together, where they're all focused on what the task is at hand at that facility, where they'll be at UC Irvine, my alma mater, zot. You win on both sides. You strengthen the connection between the team and the community by keeping the team in the community and welcoming the community to visit your team. And you get the team outside so that you can get them in a place where they're all together and continue to build that camaraderie and those relationships. Kellen Moore is proving that he was absolutely the right choice for the New Orleans Saints where they are in their lifespan right now. Will that equate to wins and losses during the regular season? We'll have to see. But with what they need right now, Kellen Moore, perfect. no notes. Coming up next, I want to take a look at the stars that are rising and that have been shining bright throughout the offseason programs, including, of course, both quarterbacks. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by friends over at Game Time, the best place to go to buy your favorite tickets. I'll never forget John Hendricks and I from the Saints Squad show going out while we were in Los Angeles and in Irvine for the training camp last year, jumping on a Game Time and buying tickets with all-in pricing turned on, so there were no surprise fees at the end, getting super affordable tickets to go and watch the Angels of Anaheim play, and it was so much fun. Grand slam, game winner, big time comeback, all that good stuff. An incredible game. And we only made those memories thanks to our friends over at Game Time. You can go and check out all of the Saints games. Every home game right now, with the exception of San Francisco 49ers, is less than $100 for a ticket. Head over to Game Time today to grab your tickets right away. Take all that guesswork out of buying tickets by using Game Time today. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the promo code Locked On NFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, family, I have 8 rising stars from OTAs and mandatory minicamp, sort of the off-season programs for you. Here's where we roll through. And of course, I want to start off with the quarterbacks. The biggest story in New Orleans right now, or the biggest story in New Orleans Saints football right now, Spencer Rattler versus Tyler Shough. I like where both these guys are at. I like the way that things are going right now. If my life were on the line and you said, Ross, you have to pick one of these quarterbacks right now to start week 1, and I was the coach and I'm not trying to project what someone else's decision-making is going to be, my choice would be Spencer Rattler at the moment. He looks the most comfortable. He looks to process the fastest right now. He looks to be able to run an NFL offense, make those 3 to 6 yard passes, all those little things that win football games. Right now, for me, I would put the ball in the hands of Spencer Rattler. But how will that change over the course of minicamp? How does Kellen Moore's investment in Tyler Shough change his mind? How does the organization's investment in Tyler Shough change their mind? It's very different when I'm trying to project somebody else's feelings. But when I'm looking at things for myself, that's kind of the way that I see things right now. But I have to tell you, the gap between these two is not large to a point to where Tyler Shough should be shut out of any conversations just because 59 passes were thrown in front of media during OTAs and mandatory minicamp. It would be foolish to make any decisions right now. However, what I will say is that both these quarterbacks have shown that they have the propensity to go out there and do the things that are necessary to play in the National Football League. Some of those things are the things that will win them games. Both of them being able to get through their reads and their progressions. I think Spencer Rattler right now is working through it a little bit faster. Makes sense. 1 year of NFL experience in addition. SEC collegiate experience. Over 600 more collegiate snaps. Over 300 more passing attempts. All those other things. There's a gap, right? There's going to be a gap in terms of experience. And so the comfort level is not surprising. But Tyler Shough, you can see the arm strength. You can see the things that he can do, the razzle-dazzle stuff. You can see the fact that he moves well, the fact that he can get the ball out while on the move, the good decision-making, all these other things. Both these guys making good decisions all throughout minicamp, OTAs, things like that. The way that I look at this is that the quarterback battle is close enough that if you ask people the same question that I just kind of hypothesized for myself, life is on the line. You got to pick one or the other right now based on what you've seen. Yes, 5 Saints media members, you're probably going to get 3 of them saying one, 2 of them saying the other, or so on and so forth, right? You're going to get different answers is what I'm saying. And so it's close enough that the answers are different. And that is the perfect scenario for the New Orleans Saints. Because that means that nobody is already shut out of this conversation. It means that nobody has pulled away at an enormous rate over the course of 59 passes in front of media, all these other things. Both of these guys have shown that they have the ability to shine brightly. What's going to happen when there's an offensive line, a defensive line, there's pressure, there's actual pressure from not just pressure from the players, but actual pressure of a ticking clock, that they're under the lights, there's a crowd, there's opponents that aren't familiar, all these other things. We got to find all that out. But as of right now, I will say both of these quarterbacks doing what it takes to keep themselves in the conversation, which is the most that you can ask for right now. Can't ask for a winner at this time, but you want both of them to be in the conversation. And you want one of them to win because they won, not because the other one lost. And so far, so good in that conversation. So that's 2 down. Another one for me, no shocker. I did a show yesterday all about it. Kool-Aid McKinstry, been outstanding. From minicamp through minicamp, but also even before that through OTAs, finished strong during the season. He just looks so comfortable, so poised, so composed. And his ability to play on the outside as a number one guy means that all you got to do is find somebody else to hold down the other side. And then you get to a point where Alontae Taylor ends up being able to stay where he will be the most impactful, I believe, which is in that inside slot role. Nick Underhill and I talked about this on Monday. We both feel that way. But you got to find the right guy over on the outside opposite Kool-Aid McKinstry. Still a question mark there. Is it Isaac Yiadom? Is it Quincy Riley? Is it Rico Payton? Does somebody else come up? Does somebody who hasn't been signed yet end up showing up? So not even the facility that takes that spot. Jair Alexander, Asante Samuel Jr. Lots of opportunities for the Saints to figure out these roles. But if nothing else, Alontae Taylor on the outside during those base sets, moving inside in the slot during those nickel sets, those nickel and dime sets, I think that's the right place for him. Speaking of, he's next on my list in terms of some of the brightest stars of the offseason programs. Alontae Taylor has been awesome. He's been excellent. Pass breakups, making plays on the football, making plays, and you can see the different ways that he's going to be utilized in the defense, from rushing the passer to run fits to press man to zone, like all this other stuff. This Saints defense is going to allow these defensive players to be able to have their eyes on the quarterback a little bit more, opens them up to be able to go and make plays. I've talked to several defensive backs that have talked about exactly that. They feel like they can go and make plays in this defense. They have a little bit more freedom to go out there and do that. Nothing robotic like what they felt before or may have felt before. I assume they felt that before. Otherwise, why convey that idea, right? And so I think that Alontae Taylor, another one of those guys that has just been absolutely outstanding so far this offseason, and has really stepped into a leadership role as well, in being able to go out there and be vocal, take on, mentor some of the younger guys, all those other things. I think that that's all stuff that fits Alontae Taylor perfectly into a T as well. Then you add in his aggressive play style and what his new role is going to be under Brandon Staley. Check mark, check mark, check mark, check mark. There were boxes, and they're all being checked. Let's stay on the defensive side. I'll give you another one. Chase Young, New Orleans Saints defensive end. Re-signed him on a 3-year, $51 million deal that could move up to $57 million over the course of the life of the contract due to incentives, things like that. Chase Young just looks like he's going to be really comfortable in this defense. He'll get to use his speed. He'll get to use his athleticism. He'll get to be a more fearsome pass rusher in terms of the way that he's being utilized and the situations that he's being asked, or not the situations, but kind of the roles and responsibilities that he's being asked to carry out, all this other stuff. Him as a stand-up edge rusher in this Brandon Staley defense is going to be a ton of fun to watch. So I cannot wait to see that. He has been a standout for me, even though you haven't seen a pass rush yet. But his ability and the speed and the 110% that he's always operating with, like he is ready to be the leader of the edge rush group for the New Orleans Saints. And that's huge. Like that is a major, major position to invest in. It's one of the premier prime positions in the NFL, and Chase Young looks ready to lead it. Finally, let me give you 3 pass catchers. Tight end Juwan Johnson, wide receiver Chris Olave, wide receiver Rashid Shaheed. I want to start off with Juwan Johnson because he's somebody we haven't talked about as much as those other 2 pass catchers, the receivers in Olave and Shaheed. Juwan Johnson, for me, just seeing the way that he's being asked to run routes, seeing sort of the alignments and stuff like that, you could just tell that his role is truly about to expand in Kellen Moore's offense. And that shouldn't be a surprise. Kellen Moore and tight ends, they get along, right? And as Juwan Johnson continues to develop as a run blocker in what is going to be what we assume is a run-heavy and or at least more balanced offense in terms of run versus pass, it's going to keep him on the field if he's able to go out there and contribute as a run blocker. Or let me say when he's able to go out there and contribute as a run blocker. But then the Saints also have Foster Moreau. They've also got Jake Stoll. They've got guys that can go out there and contribute in that way. But I think that Juwan Johnson's role is growing, and I think that that's a good thing. Olave, Shaheed, both coming off of injury. Neither of them look hampered in any way. They look ready to go. They look full go. They look awesome. And so both of those guys have been great to watch, fun to watch. And I think are 2 guys that are ready to take the top off in this offense and are going to be a lot of fun going into Kellen Moore's system. So there you go. 8 players to me that stood out the most. You'll notice that I didn't name any offensive linemen, and I didn't get into too many defensive linemen either. And it's because the trenches are still the biggest unknown for the New Orleans Saints in 2025. We got that for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The trenches are still the biggest unknown for the New Orleans Saints, in my humble opinion, when it comes to the 2025 NFL season. And there's a couple of different reasons for why that is the case. Let's start off with the biggest thing, which is that we haven't seen, well, what I think is the biggest thing. It's hard to gauge what we haven't seen. And that's one of the things that I think is really important to keep in mind about OTAs and mandatory minicamps and all these other things. Like, we can sit here and talk to you about all the good things that we've seen. It's because we see good things during that time. But I can't tell you what it is that, the team is, not showing us, right? Or I can tell you what they're not showing us, but I can't evaluate something that we're not seeing, right? So I can't tell you if the offensive line looked good. I can't tell you if the pass rush looks good. I can't tell you if the run game looks good. I can't tell you if the run defense is improving because we don't get to see any of it. We haven't seen any of that. And most of that we really won't get a full gauge of until maybe the preseason, really the regular season, as everything kicks off, because the preseason doesn't really tell you a ton. You know what I mean? And so it can be a little challenging sometimes to be able to sort of help give you the glimpse, the peek behind the curtain, when no one really knows. You know what I mean? They're not doing 11 on 11 drills, so we can't see the offensive line versus the defensive line. And even if they were doing that during OTAs and minicamp, it's not in pads and it's not full contact. And so the Saints are opting on, and I think this is the right decision for where they are right now, they're opting for health and the safety of their players, the prolonging of people's availability, so on and so forth. They're opting for all of that over people hitting one another. and look, until people are hitting one another, we don't really know the game of football, do we? I mean, look all the way down to, without an offensive line, there's no throwing lanes, right? And there's just one big old throwing lane for each quarterback and everything. So how do the quarterbacks change once the offensive line is introduced? And so I think that we're going to learn more pieces to all of that as the as the off season rolls along. We get to training camp. I assume mid to late July. It seems like that's been, like, the Steelers and the Falcons have already announced all their stuff in the 24th of July for where the Falcons are starting. We'll see if the Saints start a little earlier with a new head coach and all those other things. But until then, it leaves the offensive line, and therefore also the defensive line, and in exchange also the defensive line, as the biggest unknown for New Orleans. We have no idea what it looks like. We don't know if it's improved. And so we can't evaluate what's not being shown. We can't evaluate what's not being seen. But I understand why it's not being shown. I understand why it's not being seen. It just means we have to wait. It doesn't mean that we'll never find out. It just means we don't know yet. And honestly, even if we did see stuff, we don't really know enough. We wouldn't have known enough. What we do know is the Saints, they feel like they have their starting five on the offensive line. I think it's pretty much settled. Kelvin Banks at left tackle, Trevor Penning at left guard, Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz come back right where they belong, center, right guard, and then moving Taliese Fuanga back over to right tackle as back where his collegiate position was. And I think that's a solid offensive line for New Orleans. You get to take advantage of some of the things that Trevor Penning does well by putting him in a phone booth. You eliminate some of the things that he struggled with, which was oftentimes in space, by putting him in a phone booth, right? Putting him in between Kelvin Banks and Eric McCoy, putting him in that left guard interior offensive line spot. I think it's a wise decision by New Orleans. But have we seen it play out? No. Will we see it play out? No. So it's still a mystery, right? And because that adds to the mystery too, the shuffle, right? Kelvin Banks Jr. is going to be a first-time starting left tackle in the NFL day one, week one. That's a mystery. Right? You have a lot of confidence in him because he was outstanding in college, but do we really know? We don't, right? And that's okay. You can have a lot of confidence in Kelvin Banks Jr. You should. Top 10 selection. He was a bona fide consensus top 10 guy. He might not have been on, media boards and stuff like that, but he certainly was amongst teams. And so he was drafted exactly where he needed to be drafted, and he should be great for the New Orleans Saints. His projection is great for the New Orleans Saints. His outlook is great for the New Orleans Saints. The biggest question is, what will the reality be? Taliese Fuanga moving back over to right tackle, you probably feel comfortable about that too, but what will the reality be? Trevor Penning moving inside, you feel great about that, but what will the reality be? Big question marks across all that. So still a lot of unknown, right? Then you flip over to the defensive side, Saints defensive line. And the New Orleans Saints defense as a whole, 31st in the NFL against the run last year, 4th most missed tackles in the league. But now things work a little bit differently, right? You're playing a lot of 5 down linemen. That means you get a lot of one-on-ones across the board. So that means you're able to maybe work off of this blocker and not end up running into the extra blocker that's floating. You can go in there and make a play in the run game. You can overwhelm one side of the offensive line by only adding one player as opposed to 3 players, and that ends up helping you to get back there and either put pressure on the quarterback or stop the run, right? You have good run defenders that are being added to this team. I mean, you look at Christian Boyd, who can do that, but can also rush the passer. You look at Brian Brzee, maybe moving him to the outside of that interior at that 3-4 defensive end spot might do him some good in terms of developing further as a run stopper, in addition to what he can do as an athletic pass rusher. You look at Colin Saunders, Nathan Shepard, Devon Godshaw, great defensive run stopper. There are these players that the Saints are adding that can make a big difference for them on the trenches or in the trenches. But it's all projection. It's all outlook. So while the projection and the outlook are positive, the reality, still a mystery, still an unknown. So that's why I look at the offensive line and defensive line not as like the thing that might ruin the New Orleans Saints 2025 season, which, look, if the offensive line gets injured a bunch again, then yeah, that could completely derail what the season is going to be. But do we know that this is going to be a successful season in the first place? Like, I know we're talking about a lot of positives here, but do we know that this is going to be a successful season? It's an unknown. And a big part of that unknown are the trenches, the offensive line, the defensive line, run stopping, all these other pieces, pass protection, so on and so forth. Health is a big one as well. So I think you're just looking and waiting when it comes to learn more about the trenches to figure out exactly where things are headed for this New Orleans Saints team. But that's okay. That's an okay place to be right now. We'll learn more as training camp rolls along. All right, coming up on Monday's episode, I'm going to take the weekend off here, and so I'll see you on Monday. We're going to be taking a look back at OTAs, training camp, some of the biggest highlights, mini camp and OTA, some of the biggest highlights and some of the biggest things you need to remember as they move ahead into their break. We have that coming up for you on Monday. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Know what the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.